All right, Portland Loves Pints podcast, episode number 5, finally. So I usually start this out with what I've been brewing, because I'm an avid home brewer, and it's not just beer. I'll brew anything, basically. I'll do ciders, I'll do sake, anything that really ferments, so like pickles and kimchi and anything you can ferment, I've made almost, besides...
like an alcohol or just as regular food?
Both. Kombucha tea, really easy to make, and since they charge $3 a glass.
That's the big mushroom thing,
yeah,
right? Yeah, that was popular 20 years ago.
Yeah, pretty resurgent again right now.
You grow it in a plastic bucket, and the mushroom would split every week or two, and then you'd pour out the water.
You're by far the most knowledgeable guest I've had about anything fermentation related.
I'm a jack of all trades, I guess.
But yeah, so lately, because the temperatures have been hot and I don't have air conditioning, I've been brewing sour beers. So they call them lambics, but much like champagne, it's only a lambic if it's made in the Lambic province.
All right.
So basically you get like wild yeast strains, and you could just catch them from the air. Like if you left an open bucket, you could ferment anything, which is sort of gross. Like you would think of it as spoilage, which most people did for years until they figured out that it would either make alcohol or preserve things. So I'm making a sour cherry beer.
Cool.
And so you ferment the beer and you pour it over, I think we did 10 pounds of cherries. So when you smell it, it has a very tart smell on the nose, but you don't know how it tastes until like...
What kind of cherries did you use?
Pie cherries.
Oh, okay.
Mainly just because that's what was available at the time. I've got another batch that's ready to be poured over fruit, and I'm just kind of debating on whether to use what's in my freezer. We have white currants, which I don't know if you've ever had white currants, but they taste like peppery as a fruit, which is weird. So that sounds kind of bad for a beer.
Okay.
But,
all right,
whatever. So, for me, this is really exciting to have you on. I've been trying to get you on the podcast for a while, and really just like a mishmash of schedules not working. So, one thing, Zombie Cage Fighter. Tell me about it. Like, what inspired you to start it, really?
Zombie Cage Fighter really came from everyone telling me I should do a biography of my life, and that just sounded so boring to me. I didn't want to do the usual Rocky story. Guy comes from nowhere, beats people up, lives happily ever after. So I took adventures, things that I'd seen and done throughout my life, and then I threw in zombies as the main antagonist. But the key is, it's not really about fighting. It's not about zombies. It's about what a father's willing to do to provide for his daughter. And if you look at the story of Rocky, it's not really about boxing.
No.
You could take a box boy who wants to be manager at Safeway, and it's his climb to success and his road there. With me, that's what fighting has been. It's been a journey of self-discovery and following my own dreams, and then when my daughter came along, then making a better life for her so she didn't have to have a life like I've had. And like I always tell her, I get punched in the face and you don't have to. And we keep it real simple like that. I've put in all the work, I've done all these years, so I can provide for her a better pathway than I've had to go. But at the same time, they always say toughness skips a generation. I want to make sure I don't do that with my daughter. I tell her she doesn't need to be as tough as me, but she needs to be as tough as she can. She has to put in her own work to make her own dreams happen. So she loves to ride horses. I get her a horse riding lesson a week, but then she goes and works at the barn 2 days a week and gets paid in an extra lesson. So she's seeing the value in putting in work for her own effort. She's getting straight A's in school, all these things to where she's having the dream childhood that I never had a chance to have. And I think as a parent, that's what all parents really want. They want to know that their kids are having a better life than they had.
So one thing that I had read was that after your last fight, when you retired, you had said a lot of it was because of your daughter and the way that she had seen your face after the last fight.
Yeah.
Which is a pretty, strong statement about you and how much you care for your child and stopping fighting, because you see so many guys that keep on fighting, and it's not like they don't have kids. they just keep fighting because either it's all they know or their competitive drive won't let them stop, or, you know?
Well, so many people, they go through this world wanting to matter, wanting to make a difference, and they never find that zone where they can say, okay, what I've done has made a difference. I do matter. They never get that self-confidence, that belief in themselves. So they have to go out every week, every 3 months, whatever, take a fight or do whatever. Get all tatted up or be the cause of a scene. With women, you see them dressing outlandishly so they get all that attention. Everybody really wants to feel like they matter, and so few people really do. And that's not a statement towards, well, people in general don't matter. It's no, you choose the wrong pathway to make a difference in this world. And with me, being able to fight and provide a better life for my daughter, well, then I'd done that. When I stepped in the ring before my last fight, I knew if I lose this fight, we're not going to go hungry. And just a few years ago, that wasn't the case. I was literally fighting for food money. So when I get home, and the left side of my face is just shattered. I've now got 13 screws and a titanium mesh through the side of my face. And she takes one look at me and goes to her room and cries herself to sleep. And I said, if what I was doing was to try to learn about myself and then ultimately provide a better life for us, well, I've done that. I don't need to be the center of attention now. I don't need to go out and be all me. If my goal is really to provide her a better life, well, I need to think about that long term. And if I can step aside from the limelight, find other things that I can do that are going to have longevity, then I need to do that. And it really comes down to not selfishly looking at your life.
Yeah.
Because as a single father, I can sit down and I can say, I didn't take this opportunity because of my daughter, I didn't take this, and I can sit here and I can either blame her or I can leave and I can follow my own dreams and passions without any regard to her. And I'm not going to do that, because long after I'm gone, she'll still be alive and her kids will be alive, and on and on. And I want my life really to be the launching point for my family's legacy. So she can look back and she can tell her kids and her grandkids and their grandkids, look at what our great-great-great-grandfather Nate Quarry did and how he sacrificed so much to give us these opportunities. And now seeing that my fighting was being detrimental to her health and her well-being, I didn't want her to always be worrying about me. And I never thought about it. I'd go off and fight, and I'd come home, and I'd either be beat up or I'd be fine. It didn't really matter to me. But when I came home and I saw that what I was doing had a direct effect on her, I said, well, if this is going to affect her negatively, well, then I need to think about what's going to be best for her long term. How am I going to be able to provide for her long term? How am I going to be able to carry my grandkids around? How am I still going to be able to conjugate a verb in 20 or 30 years?
Yeah.
Those are tough things already for me. So I don't want to be taking more abuse than I absolutely have to be able to fulfill those dreams.
Yeah. Was it hard to step away at all? Do you miss that competition? Like, there's something
tough
to be said for physically dominating another human being.
There's nothing like it.
There really isn't. And I've never fought, but I do jujitsu. And when, just in jujitsu competition, when you physically better someone, it's incomparable. It's an incomparable feeling. There's nothing like it. There's some people that would describe finding God as a very strong experience for them. And I said I've never felt more at peace than when I'm on the mat and when I go away. Like there's nothing else. I'm on the mat. I'm thinking about only that, really. Like, I've never felt so singular and focused inside of one goal.
Yeah, well, that's a very good point, because the voices go quiet when you step into the cage. And I've said before, I never felt so alone as when I was surrounded by 20,000 people. Because at that one moment, all you have is yourself, all the work that you've put in. And you have a singularity of purpose. This is my one goal that I have to achieve in the next 15 minutes, the next 25 minutes. And it will be very clear if I fall short or if I accomplish it. Most people never experience anything like that in their entire lives. How many times do people show up to work and hear 20,000 people scream their name, have millions of people at home cheering for them, for their success or their failure? And to be able to walk away from that, and I was never going to say, I'm retired on Monday, I'm going to fight on Tuesday. For me, I knew once I decided to walk away, that was the end of it.
That was it.
And it was a very tough thing. On my show that I now am one of the hosts on, MMA Uncensored on Spike TV, I decided I would go ahead and retire live on the show, and it was very difficult. And no one there really understood it because they hadn't been through a process like that.
Yeah.
There's very few, maybe when you're 60 or 65, does your average person say, well, I'm going to quit this job that I hate, and now I'm going to go live in Florida. Whereas you take a young man who's late 20s, early 30s, mid 30s like I was, and says, this job that I love, I can no longer do efficiently to the best of my ability, and if I continue to do it, the effects long term are going to be very detrimental. To never again have thousands of people cheer my name as I walk out. And there's just something about it.
What's that like?
It's incredible. There's nothing like it in the world, and especially then to have someone unconscious at your feet that you know you did everything you possibly could to try and stop me from achieving my goal,
And you did
and
it
I
anyway.
took it from you. And you'll see people that want to battle in the boardroom or want to stab somebody in the back, want to be two-faced. Come into my world. If you want to treat people like that, and it's so nice even now as a fighter to have that confidence about myself.
Yeah.
When people try to intimidate me or act a fool towards me, I just think, who do you think you're talking to? I don't care if you have billions
they
of
can
dollars.
act like that. I mean, because obviously you've done it on the biggest stages, but even whether you wrestle competitively, you do jiu-jitsu or kickbox, putting yourself out there like that in a way where you can get hurt simplifies so many of the rest of your problems. I mean, I feel like, yeah, if I have a bad day at work, it's not really comparable to a person trying to choke me unconscious or break my arm. Like,
especially when your food money is on the line and your health is on the line. People go through their day-to-day life, they're every day looking to avoid confrontation as much as possible. Now all of a sudden, okay, three months from now, I'm going to meet this person who is just as good as I am, is just as tough as I am, is just as mean as I am, and we're going to meet in the cage, and all of our friends and family are going to be there to see what happens. I've seen grown UFC fighters cry in my arms. They've been so scared before a fight. I've cried before fights. I've been so scared because I've had so much of my life. This one day, if I fall short on this one day, all my dreams die. I don't get to feed my little girl. She doesn't go to college. I'm no longer going to be fighting for this organization. I'm going to have to look for other means of unemployment. Very rarely does anyone go to their job, and every single day is their job at risk. You're only as good as you were in your last fight. Every single time you fight. And if you
and
lose,
you're judged by everyone.
Yeah.
If you lose, somebody would say you're a bum.
yeah, exactly.
Well, that's pretty difficult to say. Like, especially you lose to the number one guy in the world at the time. Oh,
And when you show up and do your job, everyone wants you to succeed. How many times are you turning in a paperwork and people are tearing up your papers? How many times are you going into the office and people are locking you in your office trying to make sure you don't succeed?
Yeah.
Oh, your boss wants you to succeed, your coworkers, everybody that works with you. Man, you did great. Let's give this guy a plaque. It's not like right next door is the competition, and they keep sneaking in and punching you in the back of the head when you're trying to focus. It's a whole other world that people don't really understand until they've been in it.
yeah. So transitioning out of that world to TV, how different? I mean, you're very well spoken. It doesn't seem awkward when you're on television, but what you did before it doesn't seem like it directly translates to being on TV and necessarily talking about what you did.
Well, it's so funny. I don't believe that everything happens for a reason, but I think if you can look at a bad situation, you can find good things to bring out of it.
Yeah, absolutely.
So since the time I was born, I was raised in a cult as a Jehovah's Witness. And so when everyone else was going out, wrestling, playing sports, going on dates, I was going door to door with Watchtown and WAG magazines, trying to hawk those. And at the age of 7, I started doing Bible readings at church. So I would take about a dozen scriptures or so. I would talk about what we were going to talk about, then I would read a few verses, I would talk about those, and I would go through this. In my teenage years, I was doing that almost every single week. Getting up on stage in front of 100, 120 people and doing these Bible readings. And then when you're done, they sit there and judge you in front of the entire crowd. And they will say, you didn't speak clearly enough, you need to work on that next time, so I'm going to give you a W on your sheet, meaning you have to work on it. You didn't repeat your main your main purpose, your main subject enough, so I'm going to give you a W. You need to work on that. So you have this sheet that you take with you every time you speak, and they literally judge you on how you've done. And then going door to door doing the witnessing work, you get doors slammed in your face, you get people yelling at you, you get dogs sicked on you. So you learn how to handle rejection so much. So making the transition to a TV life wasn't as bad for me. And then again, I look at it as, what's the worst that's going to happen? I'm going to look a fool? I've been knocked out in front of millions of people, stiff as a board.
And you aren't getting punched in the
How is this
face.
going to be any worse?
Yeah.
No matter how badly I do, I'm not going to the hospital. And then I always break it down. Why would I be intimidated to talk to any one of you? Does it matter that there's now 800,000 of you? No, I'm cool.
Really?
It doesn't really matter to me.
All right, so, I mean, outside of the MMA Uncensored on Spike, you've got Zombie Cage Fighter. And there's a lot of facets to it, really, it sounds like.
Yep.
Were you always well, I guess probably not growing up as a Jehovah's Witness, but how long have you been into comic books?
Oh, that was since I was young.
Really?
Because I was never allowed to play sports or follow any of my other dreams. I would get lost in the world of fantasy. So my father, he liked Twilight Zone and things like that. I wasn't allowed to watch R-rated movies, so I didn't get to watch Aliens and Predator until I was an adult. But I was able to get Hulk comic books and the X-Men and that kind of stuff. And as long as it didn't go too far over the edge,
yeah,
it was okay. So I would get lost in that world. And I remember X Factor #1 came out when I was probably 13 years old, 12 years old. And I think the cover price was $1.25. And I think by that time I was getting about $12 a month in allowance for all the work that I did for my family. But I just didn't have enough money for that comic, so I saved until the next month. I hid it in the peachy folders. And every time I went to 7-Eleven, I would check to make sure that it was still there. And finally, I'd saved up the $1.25, and I bought it, and I ran home. And I still remember laying on my carpet reading this comic and seeing these injustices that were put right, and these superheroes that were so much larger, so far beyond my world, seeing what they did, and it just made me yearn for a life like that, where I could follow my dreams, where nobody held me down and told me, this is your life, this is what you have to do. And with Zombie Cage Fighter, that's what I did. I just took my experiences. I took things that I've seen and done, and I just started writing. And I sat down and I started to think, well, with a zombie, it's basically, if somebody has a knife, that's your concern. You can punch me in the face all you want, but keep that knife away from me. With a zombie, you have to make sure he doesn't bite you. If he bites you, even if you win, you lose. So I started to script out, okay, if I'm looking at the body as a mechanical being, he's not going to tap out, he's not going to be knocked out. How am I going to break down this mechanical being? Shoulder locks. When somebody gets caught in a shoulder lock, they're going to roll or they're going to tap. A zombie's not going to do that. So as you grab onto a twisting shoulder lock, you start tearing everything loose. Now, as the mechanism is broken, that arm no longer works. That's a tool that's gone. So looking at a zombie, well, okay, I'm going to break your bones. I'm going to tear your tendons to make certain that you're done. You're completed. You can't come after me. And I started with T-shirts. One of my artists did the TNC surf shirts from back in the 80s, which when I was 12 years old, that was the coolest shirt to wear. The Town and Country surf shirt with a surfing gorilla. It was just phenomenal. And now that artist works for me.
That's
and he's
pretty
brought
awesome.
back his old characters and put them on my shirts. And then other artists that I have that have worked with me that have really, I just go to them with an idea and they make my idea come to life. It's just phenomenal. And then really putting it all into a screenplay where everyone can see the journey from page one to the end and see how it goes. And to have people get so excited about it is just really rewarding.
So, have you always been inclined to write? Because that's definitely not something that naturally comes to people either. Writing, like I think
Not really. I never, even when I was writing this, I had never before really thought about it. I didn't have the patience to sit down and write. I write too slow for as fast as my mind goes. But I really wanted this to be down, and I viewed it like I was almost vomiting it down on the page. And I would sit there, and when I would come to a sticking point, I would just close my eyes, and I would let the world come to life. And I would say, well, what would I say in this situation? What would I do? How would I react? How would they react? and I would just watch the movie unfold before my eyes, and then I would just write what I saw. And it just all came together, and I did a few drafts and gave it to friends to read, and they gave me suggestions, and I'd touch it up some more. And so much of it was what I had gone through that there were elements missing. And people were saying, well, you need to add in like a love interest. I'm like, well, I didn't have a love interest. It's not going to be a good movie without a love interest. So I sat down and I closed my eyes and I saw, well, what did I want? What would have made my life so much easier if it was there? And then I just wrote what I saw. And the way that it came out, just I'm so happy with it. And to have people, well, for one thing, no one has ever believed in me in my entire life. No matter what I do, they always said it wasn't possible. So to have people say, well, I didn't want to read it because I was so worried it was going to suck. I didn't want to tell you and piss you off, but now that I've read it, man, this is awesome. I'm like, well, I thank you for only being half an asshole.
I can relate to that, though. When I came up with the idea for Portland Loves Pints, it's like, I like beer. We live in a city with 53 plus breweries now, but I've only been to 15 of them. And we were riding it. I was, which sounds ridiculous.
So your goal is to get drunk.
I've only been to 15 of them. Yeah, well, it's happenstance. I go there to try new beers, and if I get drunk, the destination's coincidental. But we were riding the Max out to IKEA, and from Hillsboro, that's a long-ass Max ride. And we started scribbling down on coffee cups all of the ideas I had for Portland Loves Pints, and my dogs ate the cups, but that's not the point. Like, for a long time in our living room, we just had coffee cups with little red marker scribbles all over them. And, like, that was the way that I was getting by on all of my ideas, like pushing them forward. And instead of moving on to paper or something, every time I had a new idea, it was like, oh, where's my coffee cup? Better go and put it on there.
Well, you have to capture it at the moment. I heard one time somebody very wealthy was doing an interview, and they said that the interview asked him, what's the most important thing for success? And he said, everyone always thinks it's an idea. Everybody has ideas all the time. It's the action, it's the work behind the idea that makes you successful. If you don't have that, your idea is just worthless. Take your time. You got all day.
I can relate to that too, because that's very much what I've thought about this idea, as far as having a podcast where we go out to different locations. And also, I think it's great to have local Portland, Oregonian personalities on, because there are a lot of pretty interesting people in Portland that no one knows anything about. They followed you as a fan of the UFC, or Greg Rucka, who's a comic book writer. He's an Eisner Award winner. They're fans of him, but they never necessarily connect the person with the voice that they have. I don't even know how to pronounce his last name, but the guy that wrote Fight Club, Chuck.
Palahniuk, yeah.
Yeah, another guy that's a Portlander. And so trying to get people like that on, so that, I don't know, I think they understand half of what makes Portland great. But then the other half of this project relates to there being so many breweries, and that how do you know what makes them different? Just like I would say a fighter or any business, you can sell the same thing, but no two things are alike. There's something different about each of them. But if you go and review it, you just look like a pretentious asshole. Like, no one wants you to come and be like, oh yeah, your beers are terrible. Well, that's shitty. And so I really thought more about, well, what separates everybody from everybody else and makes them a unique experience. Like, I would say McMiniman's probably doesn't make the greatest beer, but you can have beer, you can do a wine tasting, you can do a spirit tasting. At half their locations, you can stay the night out
watch
at Edge.
movies and drink your beer.
You can watch movies out at Edgefield. They've got a par 3 chipping course.
Yeah.
I'd argue that there's probably no better beer experience in the world than, like, where else can you go and do all of that at one place? And so trying to separate one thing from another and showing that everybody has something unique to offer is sort of the way that we're going. And ideally, I'd like to extend the brand, because where there's beer, there's wine. There's a lot of wine in Oregon. Coincidentally, we have a pretty hip happening micro distillery scene. We've got almost 10 micro distilleries in Portland now as well.
Very cool.
Which, yeah, again, looking to get drunk. Pretty easy
to do.
Who's
that vodka company? They do a Marionberry and...
Oh my gosh, there's Clear Creek Distilling, and I know that they do a lot of fruit infused ones, but I don't think they do fruit vodkas. There's New Deal Distillery. They do a lot of vodkas, but not that one. I don't know in Portland who does that one. I know there's East Side Distilling, Stone Barn Brandy Works, Integrity Spirits, who just closed actually, which they made like some cooking vodkas, which why waste it? But so I guess I'd really like to get into the comic book just because it seems like a passion, and I mean you've written, but in addition to writing, how did that come about? I mean, you've got a love for comic books, obviously, which I want to get into more later as far as going to Comic-Con, and now reading comics as a grown man is somehow acceptable. But, did you help sort of storyboard out the panels for it? Have you directed the whole thing, or are you deferring to a lot of the people you're working with?
I pretty much directed it. I made a few appearances on G4 and became friends with Blair Butler. He does MMA Chokehold on G4 and does Fresh Ink, where G4 covers comic books every single week. And I let her read the screenplay for Zombie Cage Fighter, and she just loved it. So seeing her comic Heart come out, and I thought she did a great job with that. I even wrote a little blurb endorsing her comic, which she used in the trade paperback. I said, well, I'm going to do my comic now. Would you be interested in helping me do this? So she scripted it out, and we went back and forth. She would send me her script, and I would refine it, and back and forth. She'd give me her notes. And then I had an artist I was going to work with, and when it came down to it, he tripled his price. And I said, well, that's not going to work for me. So I'm going to put the word out there, and I called the Goober School. Yeah. And I sent them an email and said, I'm going to do this comic, Zombie Cage Fight. I'm looking for an artist. And they said, well, it's not really something we do. We don't hook up artists with people like yourself. And I emailed back and I said, well, I'm going to take your no as a maybe and tell you about my project. And this is something I'm passionate about, explain the story and where I was coming from. And they emailed back and said, we never have anybody with that much passion contact us. We'll put the word out. And I immediately got a message from an artist, and he says, it's my destiny to do this book. I saw you fight live in Oklahoma. It was one of the best fights I'd ever seen in my life. So I look at his website and I said, well, you're a little too cartoony for me. I'm looking for somebody that can really understand the passion and the grittiness of my world. So he starts writing out sketches, and he sends me one of my character, myself, leaning in an old sink in front of a cracked mirror with a bare light bulb and just this look of total defeat in my face. And I messaged him and I said, you got the job. I'm not writing a superhero comic. This isn't, hey, look at what I've done. I came here and kicked some ass. This is, oh my God, everything I've ever done has completely failed. And now to feed my little girl, to make sure she doesn't have a life like mine, I have to go fight zombies in underground cage fights. Could it get any worse than this?
No.
And that artist started writing out the panels, and he would send them to me, and the same thing. He would send me a panel, and I think my main corrections were, no, my facial expression wouldn't look like that. He did a big splash page where my character's landing a big overhand right, and the look on his face is just pure business. And I said, that's not how I look when I'm fighting, and that's definitely not how I would look fighting for my life. So he put this look of desperation and rage on my character's face. And then the final panel, when my character's hand is raised, he had this look of just shock in his eyes of, oh my God, how did my life come to this? And I said, no, that's not what I would be thinking. I said, I would be thinking, I can't believe my life has come to this. Sad acceptance. So we lowered the face and lowered the eyes and just conveyed the whole emotional story through the faces. And it is just incredible how it all came apart. And then the colorer and the letterer, the cover artist, Mike Oming from Powers. I'd met him a few years ago and just messaged him, asked him if he'd be willing to do a cover for me, and he did. he came over to my house, and I gave him some shirts, and we just BS for a while, and he did my cover for me, and then I took one of my t-shirts, which was an old school comic book, and I made that into the alternate cover. So there's 5,000 copies of the Omin cover, and there's 100 copies of the alternate cover. And then I just put word out on Facebook. I said, I'm doing this comic book. These are my rates for advertising. Call me if you want to be a part of it. In 3 days, I had 4.5 pages sold. And I covered everything except for the printing cost of the comic. And then everything just keeps building from there. I'm so passionate about my book. I told Spike about it. They bought advertising in the book. Then they had me launch it at Comic-Con this year. And the first time I went to Comic-Con was 12, 13 years ago, just as a fan. And you could walk up and you could buy a ticket and you could walk in the door. And now you have to buy a ticket a year in advance.
Yeah.
You have to know somebody. And now to be there launching my comic and have hundreds of people waiting in line to get my comic from me and have me sign it was just amazing. See my comic on eBay was pretty wicked.
That's crazy.
And from there, everything just continues to move forward. And if anybody is slowing down the process, it's me, because I want to enjoy this. I don't want to be killing myself to make this blow up.
Yeah.
But I've had entertainment lawyers contact me and say, what did he say? I charge $750 an hour for a meeting. The fact that I called you and I'm meeting with you and not charging you means that I expect to make more money by charging you 10% than I would charging you $750 an hour. And from there, working on my show, MMA Uncensored, one of the producers works on Kevin Smith's Comic Book Man. Says, hey, how would you like to go pitch it to Kevin Smith? So I went out to Jersey and went to his comic book store. What's it called? Boy, the name escapes me. Jane's Silent Bob's Secret Stash.
Yeah.
And so I went into their store and pitched it to them to see if they would carry my comic, and just kept going on from there. The episode hasn't aired yet. It's going to be really cool how everything played out. And just continuing to move forward and seeing how much people enjoy my story and enjoy my journey, and realize that I'm not just hawking a product.
Yeah.
I'm not going to you saying, hey, give me your money for something that's crap. I'm saying, hey, this is something I think is really cool, and if you want to pay for it, that's cool. If not, if you don't like it, that's fine too. I don't really care. I didn't do it for you.
Yeah.
The fact that you enjoy it is just a really cool byproduct that I'm getting.
So what was Comic-Con like, I guess?
Oh,
I mean,
it's amazing.
I can only imagine the difference, going there 13 years ago versus now, where
back in the day, I think if it was renamed now, it wouldn't be called San Diego Comic-Con, it'd be called San Diego Pop Culture Convention, because the big movie theaters will buy just almost a block of space.
Yeah.
And they'll have, what was it? I think one of the first times I was there was the Time Machine from H.G. Wells' remade movie, The Time Machine. So the actual Time Machine was there. You'll have an Incredible Hulk that's 12 feet tall, a life-size Jabba the Hutt. And G4 has a booth there that's 2 stories tall. And I've got a friend, one of the producers for Attack of the Show, and he invited me on top of the booth, and you get to see over all of this. And it'll take you a good half an hour to walk from one end to the other. It's so big. 150, 200,000 people go there to be there and launch, and just to see all the cool stuff, and to go see artists and say, man, I really dig your artwork. And they look at me and go, man, I dig what you do. And to have them do something special for me, or I'll go to an artist and I'll say, I really love this piece, but I'm not going to give you $10 for a photocopy. I want a print on canvas, and then would you be willing to touch it up by hand so I have a one-of-a-kind piece of artwork? And so often they're so excited to know, and then I don't put it on eBay.
Yeah.
It's not a scam. It's in my bedroom, above my bed. It's just stuff that, to me, it's like, I kind of gauge things like, would my 12-year-old self high-five me if I did this? Yeah. Yeah, I'm going to go do that.
If we could all gauge our lives by our 12-year-old self would high-five us. That's pretty incredible. Like, I mean, I guess the fame sort of follows you still, but was that was never why you did it? But was that hard to step
I don't really
away
think
from,
about fame in any way, shape, or form. I still buy my own groceries. I drive my own car. I take the subway after every show on Thursday. I don't have a car. I don't get a cab. I never did anything for that reason in the first place, and I'm not going to I'm not going to slide down that pathway.
Is it crazy when someone comes up to you and says, "Man, I'm such a huge fan of yours," whether it's because of the comic book or the show or because you were a fighter? Like, is that
it's really
weird?
cool. I don't think it really affects me the way that other people, other celebrities are affected. I think they kind of absorb that and go, and their whole sense of being is based on other people liking them or giving them approval. And since the time I was young, that was never my case. When I was a Jehovah's Witness, it didn't matter what the kids at school said about me. Well, this is who I am, this is what I'm doing. And when I left Jehovah's Witnesses and was disowned by my family, disowned by all my friends, I said, well, you know what, that's fine too. Because I was what I wanted to be because it was me. Now that's no longer me. And now being on TV, doing Zombie Cage Fight or whatever, if people want to come up and appreciate what I've done, it's more like they come up and say, hey, that's great. Almost like if somebody came up and said, hey, I really like your shoes. You're like, oh, that's awesome, man. I bought these shoes. I really like them. I think that's really cool. You like them. But you don't go, man, I'm awesome because this guy likes my shoes. Just like more of a nice little side benefit. And the same thing, if the guy came up to me and goes, hey, you're a dick, I'd be like, that's cool too. I don't really care. If you want to tell me you like what I do, that's awesome. You want to tell me you don't like what I do, that's fine. It's not going to change who I am as a person or what I'm doing because I'm comfortable in who I am and what I do.
All right. This seems like as good at any time to wrap it up.
You got to let me pimp out one more thing.
Well, yeah. Pimp out as many things as you want.
So 7 years ago, I got diagnosed with degenerative disc disease in my lumbar spine. So what that basically means is in between your vertebrae, you have a disc. It basically looks like a jelly donut. Mm-hmm. And some people, the jelly will squirt out the side and it will hit your nerves and the pain will go down your leg. Other people, that donut will wear away and your vertebrae just grind on top of each other. And that was the case with me. So I fought for the world title against Rich Franklin for the UFC. And after my fight, my back was hurting so badly, I went and got an MRI, and we could see the vertebrae just sitting on top of each other. And so I was very lucky. I went to a doctor who just learned this new procedure called an XLIF, X-L-I-F, stands for Extreme Lateral Inner Body Fusion, where they come in from the side instead of the front or the back. So they're not cutting through the muscle tissue, spreading out your organs, cutting through your main ligaments of your spine. They make a small incision on your side. And I was up walking around the hospital within 24 hours.
Holy
I was
shit.
training boxing 3 months after, full speed sparring 6 months after, and I fought my return fight in the UFC 15 months after my back surgery. And it worked out so well, no one believed that it was possible to have something of the nature of a spinal fusion and then return to fighting, return to any athletics in any way, shape, or form. So the company believed in me, they believed in their procedure, and sponsored me for my return fight. And I had their logo, Nuvasive and XLIF on my shorts. And it was such a great story that after my fight, I fought Pete Sell in a rematch. And it was classified Slugfest of the Year. We just beat the hell out of each other.
I remember that.
He dropped me in the second round, and I finished him off in the third. Such a big story that Joe Rogan, in the ring, asked me about my back surgery. And I was able to give a testimony to Nuvasive and the surgery that they provided me with that gave me my life back. So I went from fighting for the title to not being able to pick up my little girl. And now here I was again fighting in the UFC live on Spike TV. It's such an incredible comeback story that Nuvasive wanted me to be a part of their family. And now I work with everything else that I do. I also work as a spokesman for them, reaching out to people that are suffering from back and leg pain, letting them know they don't have to suffer like I did. And I always tell everyone, if you get surgery or don't get surgery, that's not my goal. My goal is to show you all the options that you have so you don't have to look back over the past 5 years of misery and say, geez, I'm either going to kill myself or get surgery. I want you to make that decision before you get that far and realize if I can go fight in the UFC 6 times after my surgery, there's not too much you can't do if I put my body through all that.
Did you think about stopping after you had the surgery, just so that if it wouldn't happen again, or I mean, I guess I don't know if that was even a possibility, but if that worried you?
It was then saying that my dreams have now ended. I'm no longer going to go down this road. I'm going to have to do something else. And I was looking at, well, what other careers can I do? And I was raised as a blue-collar worker, uneducated. I didn't see any pathways that would lead me to where I wanted to take my daughter. So for me, I was willing to risk everything that I had to feed her. And if you told me during that fight, in between rounds, you'll die at the end of this, but your daughter will be okay, I'd sign on the contract right then and there. Because for me, that was my whole goal at that point, was to make sure she doesn't have a life like mine. And fortunately, everything worked out so incredibly. And with degenerative disc disease, I had another disc collapse in my back, and I had another back surgery, and this time I had an artificial disc put in. This surgery, I was up walking around the hospital 6 hours after my surgery.
Jeez.
And it was walking around.
You ever
for miles.
considered you might really be a superhero?
Well, I like to
Yeah.
tuck my cape in so nobody can see it, so we keep that on the down low. It's just, all too often, I've been a lot luckier than someone like me deserves to be. And once again, I fall into the right circumstance where I just meet the right people at the right time, and I'm not afraid to look stupid or try and find a way to take advantage of that in the right way. And then, like I said before, I don't believe everything happens for a reason, but you can find positive things out of a negative situation. So for me, going through my back surgery was the lowest period of my life until I can look back on it years later and say, well, geez, if I hadn't gone through that back surgery, how many people would I not have helped? How many people would still be suffering? Tito Ortiz contacted me. I helped him get surgery.
Yeah.
Mike Goldberg, other fighters. I've met with countless fighters and civilians that just call me crying. I'm in so much pain, I can't even get off the floor. Well, I don't know what the answer is for you, but this is what I had done. And if I can help you, let me know. And they call me months later. I can't believe it. I've got my life back. And finding meaning through the suffering that we go through, I think, is one of the big human triumphs.
It's pretty incredible. And you're really, you're helping people through something you've suffered through.
Like I said before, I think we all want to feel a short time on Earth has made the Earth a better place. We want to feel like we've mattered. And that's one of the ways that I'm trying to do that, not only with providing for my daughter better, but trying to help people find the better way back, as we call it with our organization, thebetterwayback.org, where people that are suffering can find their local surgeon who can have this surgery. And even if they end up going to a competitor, that's not my end goal. My end goal is to help them get the help that they need.
Yeah. Which is pretty admirable. I mean, it's not like you're peddling Nuvasive as
and that's
the
what I
end
tell
all
them.
be all.
If they say, well, I want to use your competitor's product, I'll say, well, you know what? I don't know anything about that, so I can't speak to it. I don't know what your recovery is going to be like, your medications, anything like that. If that's the route you've chosen, I wish you the best. But if you decide to go my route, this is what I went through, this is when I was walking, all these types of things. So there's definitely advantages that I can provide by sharing my story with them, as opposed to if they go another route. But at the end of the day, what it comes down to is they're now making an informed decision and realizing that, geez, technology has reached a point where people can have back surgery and they can live their life fully again. It's not like my aunt 20 years ago who now switched her medications, can't get off the floor, is on disability. Times have passed since then.
I mean, or go bankrupt with the surgery.
Yeah.
Which one do you choose?
Yep.
Things to look forward to in the future. We're going to launch the Kickstarter, I don't know, sometime soon, hopefully. At the end of this month, we're going to try to get Paul Stanford on, the author of the marijuana bill, before November 6th, hopefully. So, yeah, it's a wrap.
Cool.
Thank you very much.
Awesome, buddy. Thank you.